Let's go back to the folks that are kind of in a development or in
Okay.
a high school realm and that
Yeah.
are kind of just starting out. So you've got someone. Actually, where should somebody start out if they say, "Hey, I want to go be a PJ"? Friggin', where do I start?
Okay. So running is kind of this interesting thing. Like it's human. It feels like almost everyone should be able to run. We have books that are called Born to Run. Maybe you've heard of that. That's been a famous book that everyone will read and be like, I'm going to go run a marathon. And then we have people say that's ridiculous. We were born to walk and that humans were designed to walk for long distances. And then you have some people say, I don't run. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Running is a very polarizing topic because instantly when you say it, you're either going to say, oh man, I love running. I hate it. I avoid it at all costs. Or every time I run, my knees hurt. Let's make it really simple. Running is just going from point A to point B. And that's it. It's a series of single leg bounds or leaps, not as much of a leap, but bounds. The difference between running and walking is when we're running, we're on one foot 100% of the time versus walking. There's a period where both feet are on the ground. So it's actually pretty simple, even though there's a lot of complexity to it. Now, when someone's just getting started running, I think what they think is, I'm just going to start running. I'm just going to do it. I need to get fit. So I'm going to go run 30 minutes. I think where we need to start is kind of what running's going to do to our body once we start doing it. Number one, I think it's very kind of embarrassing when people are getting started running because it's going to highlight a couple things. Number one, how weak their aerobic system has become. Two, how poor their joint health is or how little prepared they are when it comes to dealing with impact or running. And three, how we want stuff too much too soon. And I'll break those down. So when it comes to, obviously, we talked about last time how when people get into their running, when people get into their cardiovascular training, people go too hard too much of the time. There's this rule in running. It's called the 80% rule. It's a fake rule that trainers know about, but they say about 80% of runners spend 80% of their time running at 80% of their max. And that's why they spend 80% of their time, 80% of the year like hurt or injured. Now, it's a dumb, silly, fake rule to emphasize that people just spend too much time running hard and they don't build a foundation. Now, the foundation is going to be twofold, and we can think of it from the bones, muscles, and joints, and then from kind of the energy standpoint. So when it comes to our body, we know that the longest thing or the thing that takes the longest to adapt is going to be your bones. But people don't think about that when it comes to running. They think, oh, I'm in the gym lifting. Maybe you have a background of me. I was a cyclist, so I'm like, wow, I'm really fit. I can go run for 5 to 10 miles. But we have to remember that when you're running, you're taking around 2 to 3 times body weight impact when you run. When you sprint, it can be up to 6 to 8 times body weight. Even some studies say 8 to 9 times body weight when you run. So first thing we've got to do is prepare the bones to run. And this is where it's going to get super frustrating to a new runner, even someone who is fit, capable, and awesome. Because if you grew up doing cross country, you might have a good foundation of slowly building, incorporating good progressions to build your volume up, but other people just start running. So if I just start running for 30 minutes and I stay at a low intensity, what's your thought? That was a good run. But your bones might not have been ready for 30 minutes of strict running because your bones won't hurt like your muscles do after a run. In fact, it takes a while for a stress fracture or stress injury to show up. So your first priority is to protect your bones and to build a foundation, because the one thing we can't train through when it comes to running, and especially when you're trying to build volume and mileage, is a bone stress injury, which would be your stress fractures or anything a runner's dealt with. I'm sure maybe you or anyone, you've known tons of people, especially through the pipeline, to develop shin splints or stress fractures. I mean, it takes everyone out. And often it's because we've done too much too soon when it comes to starting to run. And that can be frustrating. And so here's the example. So when I'm getting people to just start running, Running every day is not going to happen. In fact, most people shouldn't even be running. This sounds crazy. This sounds too slow. It sounds too conservative, but it works like a charm. So if I have a newbie who's never run before, I'm going to have them pay their dues. So maybe 3 times a week, they're going to start with a walk to jog. So maybe 4 minutes walking, 1 minute jogging, and they'll do that for 6 rounds for 30 minutes. So think, in 30 minutes, that they're pretty much jogging for 5, and then they're doing 25 minutes of walking. That sounds ridiculous, right? But we're living in the most sedentary generation in human history. Most kids are not getting 15,000 steps a day. Actually, most adolescents and kids growing up are not getting PE. They're not getting the same levels of physical activity. So we've got to assume the generation of kids that are coming into the pipeline and those who are watching haven't got as many steps throughout their childhood and high school and middle school and college as they think they are. And walking is actually pretty impactful, even though most people don't think of walking as a high impact activity. So it is. So that generally takes people. So if we swap out like a minute of jogging and walking, so think every week you add another minute of jogging and take out another minute of walking. After like 12 to 16 weeks, they're actually jogging or slow running for 60 minutes. But it took 4 months to get there. And everyone's going to look at me like, that's crazy. That's ridiculous. There's no way I'm doing this. And I'm like, the training stimulus is for your bones, not for your heart. Because there's no way that's going to overload your heart because it's not going to be at a high enough intensity. So in the meantime, while people are building up their bones, we can be supplementing with bike rides, rows, swimming. Obviously, if they're going into any career field, they're going to be doing a ton of cool skills. They can be doing Jacob's ladders. They can be doing sled drags. So actually, while people are building up their bones with walk to jogs, they should be doing a ton of sled dragging. Are you familiar with this?
Oh, sled dragging and stuff?
Yeah. So yeah. I'm not talking like we're yeah. I'm not talking. You're like
yeah.
And I'm not talking like where you're pushing a sled or where you're pulling it with the straps. I'm talking where you actually will take the sled straps, you'll tie it to a weightlifting belt, and then you'll add like about 100 pounds. You don't need much. You need about 100 to maybe 135. If you get too heavy, you're actually going to make it a problem. And then put on a clock for 30 minutes, and you're just going to drag it back and forth, driving through the hips, and boom. I'll tell you right now, if most people did a 16-week walk to jog 3 times a week, so Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and built up to pain-free 60 minutes, you only have to pay that price once normally. You don't have to do that unless you would then get like a serious stress fracture or break a bone. If while they were doing that, they were doing sled dragging twice a week. So on the Tuesday, Thursday, for 30 minutes, I'm talking 100 pounds, you're dragging the sled and you're just getting back and forth. You are building the connective tissue. You're building your Achilles. You're learning how to drive without extending your knee early. It's all good stuff. In fact, if you've ever looked into how beneficial tire dragging is, for climbing, for rucking, it's pretty phenomenal. And then in the meantime, if we're not getting enough volume, we have to build it with the bike, with the rower, and all that other fun stuff. So that was long-winded, but the most important thing to a new runner is progressing at the right pace for your bones. So we need to get to running for 60 minutes 3 times a week before we would start running on consecutive days.